Welcome to this brief lesson on understanding different forms of plagiarism. In this video, I want to illustrate some of the most common forms of plagiarism that I at times find students stepping into. I'll also highlight some common misunderstandings which I found among students, which caused them to sincerely believe that they were indeed doing things correctly while being guilty of a serious academic offense. So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own, with or without their consent, by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. And these words are not my own, so let's reference the source. Mostly I'll focus on two aspects of this definition in the example below. Presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own, and without full acknowledgement. The majority of examples will focus on using the words of others in your own work. To illustrate the number of problems, I'm going to assume that you have an assignment on the question, what is theology? And while I'd recommend that you start with your prescribed material to illustrate the problem, I'll do what many of us do when faced with any question today. Google it. And as you would expect, one of the first recommended websites I get is the Wikipedia page for theology. Now, in ignorance, you might assume that you have found an answer to the question, what is theology? And that merely feeding this back to your lecturer will constitute an assignment. This will be a clear example of plagiarism. You are presenting the work of others as if it is your own work. Sometimes students misunderstand this and think that the problem is merely a lack of a bibliography. They might then include a URL or even a full reference in the assignment. However, you are still presenting the words of others as if it is your own. More specifically, this is a failure to acknowledge the author, where the phrases or passages are taken verbatim, word for word, from a published or unpublished text. I haven't seen this ever, but let's say you went and put quotation marks around the entire section. And don't forget the in-text reference. You might have now acknowledged that this isn't actually your own work, but now we perhaps illustrate the problem. This isn't your assignment, and indicating the quotation reflects this. This will also be considered unfair usage of a source, where you reproduce, even when properly referenced, another source for a significant portion of your essay. So the first problem, students simply submitting writing found somewhere else as if it is their own essay. But even when such a crude example is avoided, some other problems are also found at times. Still working with the same question, you skip the Wikipedia page and find a few other sources. You pick out what you consider relevant sections of these and include them in your essay. Let's include something from an academic article as well, Hall's What is Theology, since this is what you are supposed to be working with, rather than random websites. And let's include the references for all three of these sources. This here still constitutes plagiarism. While you might have joined them together in a new way, the words here continue to be those of others presented as if it is your own. Even if you insert the in-text references for each of these, you can see that this still fails to acknowledge that these are direct quotations, sentences produced by others, that you now present as if it is your own. Lastly, sometimes you might edit your essay somewhat by combining these quotations with some of your own work. Yet still, this essay contained multiple examples where the words of others are presented as if it is your own. What should have happened is that each of these quotations should have been indicated as a direct quotation. That would resolve the problem, but again, it would create a different problem, since now the majority of your essay is actually not reflecting your own words. There are more to be said about integrity in our academic writing. Merely avoiding the problems illustrated here doesn't imply that there are no other problems, but to start with, you'll have to ensure that you always, and I mean always, refrain from making any of the mistakes illustrated here. Whenever you draw from the words or ideas, although we didn't discuss paraphrasing in this video, of others, it must be fully referenced, with quotation marks, an in-text reference, and a complete bibliographical entry at the end of the essay.